Well, good afternoon. This is 7/3% and decimals. So what I want you to do is go ahead and hit pause and copy this down. Well, the first part, it says percents can be written as decimals. To write a percent as a decimal, you have to rewrite the percent as a fraction with the denominator of 100. Then write the fraction as a decimal. So you simply take 56% equals, well, you write that over 100, which is what we did yesterday, writing it over 100, equals, well, say this out loud. Well, it's 56 hundredths. And you write this as 56 hundredths. Whatever that denominator, it's the hundredths. So 56 hundredths, 56 hundredths. 0.56. There is zero difference between the two of these. Okay, so let's try one. It says write each decimal as a percent. And I'm going to back this up, hit pause. All right, so what you're going to do, the same thing, now that you're going to decimal as a percent in the other direction, you say the 38 hundredths. So you write it 38 over 100 equals, well, any number over 100 is the percent. So we do the same thing with this. 1 and 45 hundredths, which is 1 and then 45 100ths. And then since this is a number of one whole, you could make it into an improper fraction, which would be 100 times 1, which is 100, plus the 45, to where you get 145. And you write that over 100, and you get your percent, 145%. Okay? Now, a shortcut to doing all this, some of you are looking at this saying, oh, I can do it a little differently, is by simply taking the decimal point, which this is my percent of 56%, and you would then move this, since we are basically dividing by 100, look at how we have 56 over 100, that's 56 divided by 100, and you then, the decimal would then move 2 places to the left. That's our mental math that we have learned in the past, that if you divide by 100, you move the decimal to the left according to how many zeros there are. Or if you multiply by 100, you move it to the right. Okay, 2 places, because of the two zeros in 100 cause that place value to shift 2 to the right or 2 to the left if you are dividing. So that is another way of doing this, taking your 56% and decimal, again, it's a whole number, and moving it to the left 2 places gets rid of the percent sign to give you a decimal. Well, the same thing goes for these. If we have 38 hundredths and we are taking 38 over 100 to get 38%, you're actually doing the opposite. You're multiplying this by 100, which then moves the decimal. We're adding a percent sign to it, so we move it to the right 2 places. Same thing for this. You're moving it to the right 2 places to the right if you're adding a percent sign. If we're taking it away, you're moving it to the left. Your number's getting smaller. If we're adding it to it, it's moving it to the right, which makes it bigger. Now you can see this number and this number are the same, just as this number and this number are the same when we refer to, and I say the same, they're not really the same, but the digits themselves, I should say, are the same. 38, 38. 145, 145. All that's changing is that decimal point, and that is really, really important that we do it in that manner. Okay? So we have to make certain that we're moving the decimal point 2 places to the right if we're adding a decimal point on, if we are a percent sign on. If we are getting rid of it, you move it to the left 2 times, because again, it all revolves around that number 100. This is another way of solving these. Okay, and most most students, and I'm certain that your parents will as well, realize and understand that moving the decimal point is how they do it as well, okay, instead of doing all the math. But this is the logistics, the logic behind why it is becoming what it's becoming with percents and percents to decimals. So let's try some. It says write each percent as a decimal. So if we're going to write this percent as a decimal, you have a couple options. One, we can say, well, here's my 27%. My decimal point is here. And if I'm getting rid of my percent sign, I'm moving it to the left 2 times to give me 0.27. That is my answer. Now, if you do it the first way we talked about, taking 27%, you can write that 27% over 100. And when we say 27 hundredths, we write it as a decimal 27 hundredths. Okay? Whichever method works for you is perfectly fine with me. So let's look at this one. Again, we're converting this percent to a decimal. So go ahead and hit pause and solve this. So again, 136%. My decimal point is here. We would then move it 2 places to the left. Always has to be 2. Can't be more, can't be less. Again, it's because we're dividing by 100 to get that answer. And so when we do that, we get 1 and 36 hundredths. Okay? Now if we were to take 136 and write it over 100, okay, you would have to divide that again. Well, we have one whole already in this, okay, and so you can say that's going to be one whole. That's in front of the decimal point. So really you would have to write this as a mixed number, which when we do that, we get 1 and 36 over 100. Okay, so once you do that, then that's why we get the 1 in front of the decimal point, and then 36 hundredths gives me 36 hundredths as the decimal value. So you can see we get the same answer, just a little different thought process. Let's look at our next one. 4%. Go ahead and hit pause and solve this. So if we have 4%, we can write that 4 over 100, which 4 100ths would be decimal point 0.04. These are always tough ones because a lot of students want to write it as 0.4, which is not 4 hundredths, that's 4 tenths. So be careful with that. 4 100ths has a 0 in front of the 4. Another way again, if we have 4% and we're moving the decimal, again, has to move 2 times. 1, 2 times. Right here, we have to annex a 0 for place value to where we would get our 4 100ths. Okay? Same answer, just a little different process. Now we're going to go from a decimal and write it as a percent. So go ahead and hit pause and solve this. So again, 32 hundredths is 32 over 100, which equals 32%. Done. It's that simple. Or you can simply take my 32 hundredths, and since we're adding a percent sign, we move it to the right towards that percent sign, and we get 32%. Again, have to move it 2 times. Let's look at our next problem. Go ahead and hit pause and solve this. So again, if we're writing this as a fraction, it would be 2 and, so 2 is my whole number, 91 hundredths. So it's going to be 2 and, sorry, did that wrong, my bad. So then we've got the whole, so we've got to make this into an improper fraction, and 100 times 2 is 200 plus the 91, so 291 over 100. Remember, you have to get it over 100, every bit of it, even that mixed number. So 291 over 100 is 291 Another possible way is taking my 2 and 91/100ths. I'm adding the percent sign, so I'm going to go towards that percent sign and simply put a percent on it by moving the decimal to the end, which happened to be at the end. We're moving it again 2 times. There could be more numbers behind this, so be very careful with that. Ends up being 291%. Let's look at our next one. Go ahead and solve this. So I have 6, and that would be 6/100ths. If we're writing it as a percent, it's simply 6%. Done. If we have our decimal point, we are again moving it 2 places to the right, which puts it there, and we see that that gives me just 6 alone percent. Okay. It'll take a little time as we go through these. Lots of practice certainly makes perfect, especially when we're dealing with fractions to percents and percents to fractions and percents to decimals and decimals to percents and decimals and fractions. So it gets very, very confusing at times. So please be very, very careful and think about each step that you're taking and why you are doing it. And I will help you with that as well as we progress through this chapter. So hope you have a wonderful evening, and if you have any questions, again, please make sure you write those down and we'll discuss them further in class. Have a great night.